Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. We are still staggering through the wreckage of Sunday's 38-3 loss to the Cowboys. And I wanted to bring in one of my favorite young guys on the beat because he does such an excellent job with the film breakdowns, the analytics, going a little bit deeper for some statistics, but he also delivers it in a nice, manageable, digestible way. He's got a nice way about him, too. It's Taylor Kyles from CLNS Media, and he's going to take us through what he saw in the game film. What I came to conclude yesterday, and you know what? Roll this. This is Rex Ryan getting a 71-mile-an-hour fastball right over the middle of the plate on ESPN yesterday.
Are you referring to Pea Shooter Jones? I think you are. Because here's the thing. The guy doesn't have a whole lot of arm talent. I've said it from jump. Maybe the weakest arm for all starting quarterbacks in the league. I don't hate. I'm telling you, based on all the years, I've had to defend against everybody. I would love to defend against this guy. Are you kidding me? Like, this guy can't throw. To think this guy is going to take you to where you want to go, you're absolutely crazy. This guy can't pitch it outside the numbers. And I'm sorry, that's an NFL throw.
Yeah.
And what I saw was he's supposed to be accurate. Really? The ball's on the inside part of the damn on an out route.
I don't disagree with all that.
Are you kidding? Where's the power?
Who are your receivers,
Where's the
though?
power? It has nothing to do with my receivers if I can't step into a throw and fire it outside the and that ball needs to be thrown in the outside.
Here's where
of the
you
guy.
and I are
He's
disagreeing.
not.
I think he can step in to throw. I don't think he is.
He damn
I
sure
think he
is.
has zero trust.
I
in his
just
pass
base what I
protection.
see. And again, I've defended everybody.
Yeah.
I've had to face them all. Drew Brees was the guy that lacked. He never had great arm talent. He threw with anticipation and accuracy. That's what this guy has to do.
I will say this. Rex is not entirely wrong. It was a perfect storm for Mac Jones. Make him move his feet, make him lean back, and then you're going to really highlight the fact that he does have a little bit of a pop gun arm. The contention that Mac can throw it hard, so can I, so can Taylor. If everything's going right for you, you can too. You just wind up and step through it and rip it. But if you can't do that, if you have people bearing down on you and you just have to flick your wrist and bend your elbow and still get velocity on it, most NFL quarterbacks can do that. Mac can't. So it really highlighted that limitation for him, and it looked bad, real bad for him. We're going to interrogate that question. We're going to look at the offensive line. We're going to look at the fallout from the Judon and Gonzalez injuries. And I'm going to ask Taylor, if he's ready to just put his eyes towards Thursday and Friday and tell me whether or not the Saints can do some of the same damage the Cowboys did, or if the Patriots can start to secure one of those 9 wins, reachable, reasonable, attainable wins that I still see on the schedule. I swear to God I do. Here comes Taylor Kyles. Here's our guy. Welcome in. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, brother. It's tough circumstances, but I'm honored to be talking to you today.
It's a blast. We always have such great conversations. And I think what impressed me most early on when I met Taylor was not just the questions that he asked when he was in a Bill Belichick press conference or a scrum talking to players. I'm a good question guy, but I'm not really that in-depth on the X's and O's where I'm asking that kind of next level. What are you looking at with your leverage? He does, but he doesn't do it in a, hey, I'm part of the club kind of question. It's like he really genuinely shows great interest, and his great interest gleans great information, which he then passes to you and me. So start swapping info. What went wrong for Mac when you watched that tape?
Yeah, it was tough. I really do think that Mac had a good start to the season. You know, I thought that the supporting cast really wasn't doing him a lot of favors, but for the most part, he was a big reason that the team was even in a lot of the games, you know, in so much as you can say that. A lot of it was
Agreed.
The defense as well. But it was tough because against the Cowboys, you were seeing things like that was 2022 Mac. Those were things you were hoping he left in the past. And more than that, really caught me off guard, and what was really stunning was usually Mac isn't somebody who compounds mistakes. If he has one really big gap in a game, he does a pretty good job of bouncing back, really locking in. We saw it against Miami. Bad decision, probably the worst he'd had up to that point in the season, where he just throws it up to Xavier Howard. Devontae Parker doesn't win the route, but it still isn't a great decision when you need points right outside of scoring territory. But he locks in after that. He's making throws on the run. We're like, oh my God, where did this Mac come from? What we saw against the Cowboys was once he got strip sacked, which was a really poor awareness from him. Someone's coming up behind you.
Has to be.
It looked like he was separating his hand to make a throw that I didn't even think was there. So once that happened, you saw it start to snowball, where it felt like his clock was just off because he was either too fast or he was a little too slow. You saw him start missing third down throws to Devontae Parker that were there underneath to convert. And then more than that, it got really bad when you started seeing him throw across the field, just fundamentally.
Yeah. Let me interject on that. Let me interject because we say it so often, it's trite to even say it. You're not supposed to throw across the field. But he did that. He knows he's not supposed to. He's a cerebral quarterback. He knows that when you throw across the field, you've now brought basically 11 players, defenders, in between you and the ball, because you've now played horizontal and you're throwing, it changes the orientation of the play so that more people get in between you and your receiver. It's just like basketball, ball, you, man. There's a whole shit ton of guys between ball, you, and man. Yeah. So when you make that throw once and get away with it, okay, good. But you should go back to the huddle, Taylor, and say to yourself, all right, I get away with that, but I'm not going to be living like that. I can't do that because I could get really hosed. Or the dainty flip to Ramondre Stevenson, or the sideline throw into, what's the kid's name?
Javon Curse.
Javon, yeah.
Right in the stomach.
Embarrassing throw. To make your point, to amplify your point, he compounded the mistakes with, it's either panic, resignation, desperation, or a complete meltdown of the synapses. Why would Mac Jones play so stupid when his only superpower is accuracy and intelligence?
Yeah, it was really inexplicable. And that's where I think he had a lot of goodwill, and I think a lot of it, I don't want to say all of it, because if he has a good game next week, I think, okay, he's in the right direction.
You're right.
But even still, it's not even so much that you're saying, okay, that was just a bad game. That's not something you want to see from someone who's striving to be a franchise quarterback. Like you said, his superpower is his intelligence, his accuracy. And when you see brain leaving the head in terms of just really mind-boggling decisions, and I'm not someone who's trying to sit here and get headlines or anything, but truly, when you see the mistakes he was making, it wasn't even okay. It's a correctable. It's just fundamentally bad errors that you don't want to see from your pocket passer quarterback in an offense where they've been preaching, we can't beat ourselves. And you're literally giving the team 2 touchdowns that's across from you. So, there's not a great explanation, I don't think. Right. The pass protection needs to be much better. The guy was under pressure 50% of the dropbacks. That was skewed a bit because the game got out of hand. Dallas is allowed to pin their ears back. But at the same time, pass protection needs to be better. And I think that's what you saw, where 2 years of very shaky protection, one, you kind of see it in his mechanics, where when he releases the ball with Brady, you would see, I'm not comparing them obviously, but just fundamentally, Brady is textbook. You see, he puts that foot in the ground, he leans into his throws, and he follows through in front. Mac will oftentimes—
Right hip goes through, ass turns, hip turns.
You don't give yourself enough credit. You know what you're talking about, my man.
I know you know what? I do know the fundamental shit. I just don't know the X's and O's like you do. But I could talk throwing nonstop. But his ass gets heavy in the back, and he's on his back and his heels. You mentioned something that was really great, because I am a Mac Goodwill ambassador. Mm-hmm. And I actually looked at my retirement from this organization on Sunday evening. How do I get out of the Mac Goodwill ambassador business? Because he did. He frittered away a lot of goodwill from people who've been saying he's pretty good. He's better than you think. He's better than you give him credit for. It is going to be hard to recoup that, because that's going to leave a dent. Yeah, all right. Mac went 21 for 26 for 214 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they beat the Saints. But we now know that it's in there, what we saw in Dallas.
Yeah, and it's one thing if he's a quarterback who has a record of kind of getting you out of bad positions. That's the thing. His goodwill has a cap because he hasn't won those close games. Now, I've also been saying, and I don't want to, be a hypocrite here, I also think his supporting cast has let him down. Like I said, he was the reason they were in those games, because when you look at the late drives against these good teams, he's making the throws. Like, he's also getting sacked very quickly. Guys aren't making catches that they need to make. Mac Jones was holding up his end of the bargain in those games, but they still didn't finish. So there's only so much you can say when you're talking to, the mass of the masses, and you're trying to convince them, all right, Mac Jones isn't the problem. No, he wasn't the problem the first 3 weeks. He was actually one of the guys you're looking towards for a solution. The Jets game was one where I thought you really need to see a step forward for this offense. But in the conditions, I know JT O'Sullivan at the QB school did a great job of breaking down just how difficult it was throwing in just a sloppy Meadowlands that day. So you give him some reprieve. But perfect conditions, and you're in a dome in Dallas, and it's not even the physical execution. Like, if you look at throws of 10-plus air yards, we've been getting on about not being able to throw deep. He had his first deep completion since week 1.
I know.
He's
the Henry one.
The Demario Douglas one.
The Demario Douglas one too. But I didn't know if that was air yards, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was in the intermediate part of the field. That's another place that you.
The Hunter Henry one was insane. The Hunter Henry one-handed catch.
That's his guy. And then he had the Gesicki one under pressure. Like, his first 2 throws under pressure were fantastic. You're like, yes, that's the poise you've seen from Mac Jones through the first 3 weeks. But once he got strip sacked, that just fell out the window. And all the poise and all the Mac's been better under pressure, which he was through 3 weeks. That was gone. And I really do think this is a rock bottom performance, mostly because I think if he does it again, even though Bailey Zappi is not in his caliber, I think that you have to look at, well, if you're going to give the other team points, then we can't have you on the field. And that puts the team in a really bad spot.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. And Bailey Zappi's not good. Bailey Zappi is a guy who I would rely on for mop-up duties, and he's a 3, closer to a 3 than a 2. And God bless him for what he did last year. It was outstanding, but circumstantially. But you're right. If you have, again, I'll use some basketball. If you have a point guard who's pretty talented, but he continues to turn it over, and he's in his own head, then you're going to have to get the 6'1" point guard out who's pretty capable and put in the 5'8" guy who's just not going to turn it over because he knows that that's the only job he has. His job isn't really to score as a point guard. It's to just not turn it over. And that will actually become the demand. When you're a good team and you have a good quarterback, the demand is go put points on the board. When the demand becomes don't turn it over, well, then shit, the party's over. That's a baseline. That's an expectation. And
that's where we were last year with the whole Bailey versus Mac debate. Like, I tried not to feed into it, but it got to the point where I was saying, hey, if he, like against the Bears, where we did see he turns the ball over, he doesn't look good. And then it's all right. Yeah, you have to put Bailey Zappi in because he's actively hurting your team. No one wants to do it. I don't think anybody is actually expecting Bailey Zappi to outperform Mac Jones. But yeah, when you're in a position where your quarterback's job becomes don't screw up, as opposed to do your thing and sling it and be smart and all those things, that's where you say, okay, I'm really worried about where this offense is going, because you needed Mac to kind of rise all ships just in terms of competence and delivering the ball and letting people do their thing. And the supporting cast, like I said, outside of, I'd say the tight ends really haven't done or performed to the caliber that I expected going into the season, especially the veterans. The offensive line is shot. And now if your quarterback's lost that confidence, this is a huge week for them. The Saints are a good defense. I'm not saying they're going to go out and score 30, but they need to show at least they can move the ball. They cannot turn the ball over again like they did in New York, and they can show some level of fight because they took several steps back against Dallas. I
did a column yesterday and really went back and looked at Dakota Randall from Ness and asked a great question of Bill after the Patriots 47-17 loss to the Bills at the end of the 2021 season. And Bill said after that loss, we have to find out if that was just a bad day or if that's who we are. Since that game, that 47-17 loss, And that capped a 1-4 stretch, Taylor, down the stretch in that 2021 season. Since that loss, the Patriots in 2022 went 8-9, and now they're 1-3. So I think that I had the number at 10-16 since 2021, when that little stretch started around Thanksgiving. 10-16 is what the Patriots are, and they're 9-12 since the beginning of last year. So we did get an answer for Bill when he asked, is this who we are, or was it just a bad night? That is who they are. And he actually employed that question again in answering, he employed that answer again when he was answering Dakota Randall, saying, well, I guess we're going to find out. We have 26 games when you go to that 10-16 mark that they've performed at that level. And I also did a quick thing in looking at how many times the Patriots have trailed. In their last 10 games dating back to last year, they had a nice game against Minnesota. Great nip and tuck. That was a legit football game. Really got us excited. That's a good team. Minnesota got some weapons. Patriots were up. Game was tied. Minnie was up. Patriots tied it. Patriots went ahead. That kind of game where you say, it's a competitive team. Since that game, the Patriots have fallen behind by a touchdown or more against Vegas 17-3, against Arizona by a touchdown, against Miami by a touchdown in the third quarter with Raheem Mostert, against Miami again 17-3 in that eventual loss. With the first time they trailed with Skylar Thompson and Teddy Bridgewater, they fell behind, obviously, Philadelphia. They fell behind, as I mentioned, Miami. They fell behind 22-0 to the Bengals. They allowed an opening kickoff touchdown return to the Buffalo Bills. Taylor, well-coached teams don't fall behind by significant amounts, no matter who the opponent is, in 9 of 10 games. Patriots are not a well-coached team. They're poorly prepared. There's no other way to get around it. 10-16 over the last 26, quickly behind in 9 out of 10 games, regardless of who you're playing. It's inescapable.
And I think you kind
of prove me wrong. Show me the line.
I mean, I wish I could prove you wrong. It's they're a competitive team. That's what they are. And I think they're competitive, which puts them right below good and right above bad, where they're in all these games. Like, you rarely see them get shellacked. Like, I think the Bears game was probably the best example in recent history of them being woefully unprepared on both sides of the ball. Offense wasn't good, but also
I forgot about that. I said, it's funny, I was on TV yesterday and I said that the last time the Patriots got their asses kicked was I went back to the playoff game. I totally forgot. I blocked out the Bears game against the worst team in football.
A lot of people did. Yeah. And that's because they weren't prepared for Justin Fields running. Now, I sensed that in the game because leading up to it, I was doing some research. I worked for Next Gen Stats at the time. And the only times Justin Fields had even kept the ball was week 1 against San Francisco when it was raining. So there was no tape on it. But even still, it's like, okay, Lamar Jackson just tore you up on the ground. Maybe do some preparation just in case they have something there. I think that was the worst game plan they've had in a long time. This was different, though, because the defense, they gave up a couple of touchdowns, like Miles Bryant against CeeDee Lamb. That's going to happen. There was another drive late in the game where they allowed a long drive. But the defense was pretty good in the middle stretch of that game.
It was okay.
Despite losing Christian Gonzalez. Like, it was far from perfect. The tackling, pursuit angles needed to be better. But it didn't feel like a game where the defense really let you down. Could have been better, absolutely. But it was the offense actively giving points to the other team, or that's where you're saying, all right, first you're a team that just can't score. You can move the ball, but you can't finish drives. All right, you got something to build on. There's some positivity there. But this is where it's such a departure from anything we've even seen from the offense, where it's just such egregious mistakes over and over. I think that the most praise you can give this team is that they're competitive because they will be sound defensively for most of the game. Their special teams is improved, and that will keep them, again, competitive. But it's whether the offense is going to not even just not be able to finish, but even be good enough to make it a game where you're saying, okay, they might be able to hang on if they get the ball last. Like, going into the season, That was my whole thing. I didn't think they were going to blow teams out. I thought they'd have a good record because the defense would keep them in late and Mac Jones would get the ball last and have an opportunity to score. He's had those opportunities, and they haven't been able to do it.
What I wanted to see from the Patriots offense, and I hammered it a million times, it's oversimplification, but the Patriots had to figure a way to get to 24 points. I don't care how they do it. You have to get to 24 points on a regular basis in the National Football League in 2023. They've scored 3 touchdowns against the Eagles, and they scored 3 touchdowns in the finale against the Buffalo Bills. The only other time they scored more than 3 touchdowns last year was against the Cleveland Browns. That game is about to age out and be more than a season away. So you can't get to 24 points with your offense alone, basically, at least on touchdowns. You can kick a couple of grab-ass field goals. But the bottom line is they don't. They're unable to do that. And that is going to hamstring you forever. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/NSBO and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. 21 plus and present in Mass. Hope is here. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com, gamblinghelpline.ma.org, or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. Play it smart from the start. GameSenseMA.com or call 1-800-GAM-1234. I want to ask you one question before we get to the offensive line. You mentioned the defense and CeeDee Lamb. Was Myles Bryant ready for the snap? I don't think he was ready for the snap.
I'm not sure. It was such a clean win, I think, genuinely. I mean, like, that's a mismatch no matter
how you
slice it. Like, I think the result would have been the same. But
right at the last second, he's like, is he about to snap it? Oh, he snapped it. Oh, shit.
Yeah. Again, I don't think the result would have been different, but I think you're right. I think he was just a tick behind on that one.
He has been better than the Myles Bryant of 2022. That wasn't good. That wasn't a good play. And we all know that Myles is a little bit over his head against the CeeDee Lamb, but he has been better than the Myles Bryant of 2022. The offensive line, my friend. We all knew the right tackle was a gaping hole that needed to be addressed. It wasn't addressed. It's been trying. The Patriots have now tried to address it with Riley Reif, Calvin Anderson, Vidarian Lowe. I'm probably missing somebody. Not only is that a glaring issue, but they have areas that need plugging elsewhere. How bad off are they? Because Mac will go as the offensive line goes.
I think Trent Brown and David Andrews, like you're solid. David Andrews getting up there in age. If a team wants to expose him with their best pass rusher, like you saw Micah Parsons on Mac Jones's pass to Mike Gesicki over the middle, great throw, but they put Micah Parsons head up over David Andrews, beat him pretty clean. Like, that's going to happen. But for the most part, David Andrews is one of the guys you can rely on more often than not. Although, again, there were some cracks in the game because he's getting up there in age. Trent Brown, one of the better tackles in football. He may not be perfect all the time, but I do not see him as a concern. Mike Nwenu, still working his way back. I think you're seeing it with some of the
I hated to see that. I hated to see that game from him because he's so good. And you people don't give a shit, and I understand that. He is such a good guy. Mm-hmm. I know that you're sitting there saying to yourselves as fans, I don't care if he's a good guy. Just block somebody. He is a good guy. But anyway, go ahead, my friend.
Same thing with Calvin Anderson, man. Like, I really hated what I had to say about Calvin Anderson because he's a very, very sweet guy, but just the on-field product wasn't it. So Mike Nwenu, I think by midseason, he'll be fine. I really do think he's just still working his way back. He missed the entire summer. Like, you have to give him some leeway. I've heard some Antonio Mafi is better than Cole Strange talk. I think it's way too soon to be saying that. Cole Strange, his first game back, again, missed all of training camp except for the first few days after suffering a knee injury, which he's still working on. He's either week to week or it really is a thing where he's kind of fighting through, which you got to.
It's a guy who opted not. I can tell you this: it's a guy who opted not to have surgery. Mm-hmm. So you got a guy out there who's playing who could have had surgery, opted not to. Now he's playing on it, and this is where you get hosed as a player sometimes. You suck. Well, I'm trying to play with something that needs surgery here.
Exactly. And that's where I think there's some validity in the Mafi versus Strange debate, because if he's truly not healthy, then yeah, play Mafi, because he hasn't been perfect. He's got his growing pains. Sometimes I feel like he more shoves guys than he does actually block them. His hands need some work. His balance can be an issue at times. Like, he is very much a work in progress. But Cole Strange, the first game that he was back against the Dolphins, the issue was blitz ID and stun ID, where guys are coming into his area and he's initially blocking someone else and was too late to diagnose, or just didn't at all. That was the issue against the Dolphins. Against the Jets, he got pushed around by Quinnen Williams, the second highest paid defensive tackle in football, one of the most talented players in the sport. That's going to happen. I pointed it out, but I wasn't shellacking the guy because he lost to a really good player. For the most part, I didn't really see him pop up in negative ways outside of that. So I still think he's one of your better options at guard. But again, the health thing, I think that's just if he feels that he's not ready to be an asset out there, yeah, put Mafi. Part of the growing pains, as they're going to have on defense, obviously, with some of the guys that are going to have to step up. And then right tackle. Like, that's the big bugaboo. Vidarian Lowe has been solid at times. I do think he's brought better run blocking than you had with Calvin Anderson. Mm-hmm. And even against the Cowboys, he had 9 pressures, which was, I think David Andrews had the most with 3 allowed. He had 9. To his credit, I do think there are times where he is doing his job in forcing guys to go around the pocket. It doesn't always look pretty, but he's doing enough that he's giving Mac Jones an area to step up. The issue is he also has some pretty clean, quick losses where it's like not even competitive. Like in the run game, there were a couple of snaps where guys got right by him immediately and were in the backfield. He also tends to be an aggressive pass blocker. He likes to get out there and get his hands on guys. I actually asked him about that. That's just what he was coached to do when he was with the Vikings, maybe even going back to college, which Isaiah Wynn was that way too. That's fine if it works. If
you don't get your head too far out in front.
Exactly, because guys are swiping his hands away, especially he's facing so many good edge rushers. They're anticipating when he shoots his hands, and they're knocking it down, which gets him off balance. It gets him behind, and he's giving up the edge to the point where it's not even pushing guys around and like giving Mac Jones another couple seconds. They're coming around flat, where Mac doesn't really have a lot of space, and it doesn't help when there's line games for the Cowboys where there's nowhere for him to step up, and it's, I can't even, just get out of trouble. I have nowhere to go. So it's a joint effort like the offensive line always is. So when you have Antonio Mafi not great at picking up stuns, or, David Andrews or Mike Onwenu are a tick behind, and then there's mess up front, it makes Vidarian Lowe look even worse. That said, I think they need Riley Reif out there, and I don't even know if that's the solution because they put him at guard for whatever reason. You don't even know.
So basically, you need something else
there. I think you do, and I think Vidarian Lowe has been their best option right now, but it's been such a significant issue that I think that you can make up for one hole on the offensive line. If it was just right tackle, I think they could kind of get away with it, but it's been below average play where he's losing too quickly and plays aren't even sometimes getting.
That's the thing is too quickly. Look, you can lose. Just don't lose right away.
Not instantly. Yeah.
Judon and Gonzalez are injured. Judon's got a torn biceps, which we could all basically see within 7 seconds of the play happening and seeing the replay. And it's a torn labrum, according to WEEI's Mike Cadlick, for Christian Gonzalez. That's going to take some time. Dislocation and pain as a result of it popping back in is one thing. Torn labrum is another, which really sucks for Christian Gonzalez because he was a pleasure to watch. All the injuries suck, but I hate it. The kid just turned 21. He's playing out of his mind. He's clearly very good. And he gets injured on kind of a benign play. But the Patriots are already down Jack Jones and Jonathan Jones. They'll be coming back a little bit, but they're into their corner depth. And that's not a great place to be, especially if you're going to lose your best pass rusher. That means it's harder to get home. They're going to need, I guess, Keon White, Josh Uche, Christian Barmore. They're going to need twists and stunts and loops, and they're going to need the linebacker level and even the stray Marte Mapu blitz or added rusher to speed things up, because you can't have Sean Wade and Miles Bryant back trying to cover for more than 3.2 seconds. Did I sum it up okay?
I think so. I still think Miles Bryant is probably going to be one of your main outside corners.
Okay.
At least until they get Jack and John back. What I think is going to happen is they didn't put Jonathan Jones on short-term injury reserve, which tells me that it's either week to week and they really just don't know. And maybe they're like, all right, if you don't feel good enough, we're just not going to risk it. Or they figured he could be back in 4 weeks. And instead of missing that 4th week, if he was on short-term injured reserve and coming back for a 5th, they said, all right, we're just going to keep you healthy through 3 weeks, bring you back then. If that's the case, and he plays, I think it's Jonathan Jones and Miles Bryant on the outside. I thought it would be Jalen Mills outside kicking Miles Bryant back in, but I really think he thrives in that slot role. He's physical. He's instinctive. We saw his blitzing ability was huge on that 4th down stop. And I tweeted about it, actually, and he liked the tweet about him being in the slot. So I feel like that's kind of where they're trending and where they like him. So the secondary, I think that's your group. It's not great, but frankly, I think Jalen Mills is still a fine player. I thought he was being underutilized, quite frankly, because I do think he can be a difference maker for your defense with the energy he brings in. Like I said, that playmaking ability that we saw. Jonathan Jones, we saw, if he's your top corner, it's not ideal, but he's good against the vast majority of guys. You just don't want him having to be on an island against true number ones. Miles Bryant, if a team's going to, try to attack him, I think he's fundamentally sound enough that he's not going to make like the Sean Wade mistakes where he's giving up a curl, but he's taking a bad angle and then an 8-yard gain turns into an explosive play. Like those are the things that you want to avoid. I think Miles Bryant gives you that. And I don't think he's going to be easy thrown over his head for the most part. Like we saw it with Jalen Waddle, the 2 plays that he was targeted against Jalen Waddle, underthrown, but he's still competitive. Like that's tight enough coverage that you're not saying, geez, this guy's getting gassed. So the secondary, it's an issue, but I think they can still be solid. The pass rush, I do think you're going to see a lot more Keon White because he's your only every down outside linebacker now. Anthony Jennings, great run defender. He can knife into the backfield and be successful on stunts, but he's not like a pass rusher the way a Matt Judon is, where he has a lot of things you have to worry about. Josh Uche, fantastic pass rusher. He gives you a ton of things to worry about, but he's not as sound against the run to the point where you're putting him out there in the base personnel groupings and saying, I'm comfortable. This is fine. Like I want the offense running at him, but I'm confident he's going to be okay. Keon White's going to have his growing pains, but at this point, this is starting to feel like a situation where a lot of young guys are going to have to go through growing pains. You're just going to have to see what you got.
The Saints are a difficult opponent in that they are so good defensively at times. And it was pointed out to me by Rich Eisen, had him on. You'll hear from Rich Eisen after we're done with Taylor. The problems they gave Brady are probably the same kinds of problems they can give the Patriots. They're just sound defensively. They'll turn up the volume and there'll be a problem. So I don't know if this is a get right week for the Patriots offense. I don't even know if it's a get back to 0 week for them.
Yeah, I think this is just, like I said earlier, I think this is going to be one of those games where you just need to be competitive. Like, yeah, there's going to be some 3 and outs. It's probably going to be ugly at times because, as you pointed out, they're fundamentally sound. They're not going to give you plays. It's not like the Patriots can necessarily make big plays on their own, as we've seen. So it's going to be a bit of a slugfest, and the defense is going to have to step up. Thankfully, it's Derek Carr. He played relatively well against them when he had to last year, but he's a guy where you're saying, okay, if there's a guy on the schedule that I'd like to face, given everything that's going on with the defense, he's probably up there in terms of that. No disrespect, that's just what it is. But yeah, the offense, this isn't a great pass rush for the Saints necessarily. So I think that is something that kind of works in your favor. Maybe Mac has a bit more time. Vidarian Lowe isn't going to have the tough matchups he's had where he's going up against Bryce Huff, John Franklin Myers, Micah Parsons, like guys who really do not really suit what his game is. So yeah, I think this is really like, it's not quite get right, but just show what you got. Like go out there, play ball, be competitive, and don't hurt yourself. If they come out of this game with minimal penalties, I think at this point, expect them to have none is a bit, as maybe asking too much.
No doubt.
Minimal penalties and 0 turnovers, and at least make this a competitive game where you either squeak it out or, you force the Saints to pull off some kind of comeback or something like that at the end of the game. I think they need to win this. I don't even really want to acknowledge the idea of a loss because I think that really, really puts you in a bad spot if you lose these next 2 games. But offensively, really, you can't hurt yourself again because of the hole that you dug yourself after a tough performance against the Jets where you needed to show you had some fight and then just throwing one away against the Cowboys. Like you got to show some life.
Have to, because as you said, you can't get to 1-5.
Yeah.
Because then we're going to have some difficult talks about historic decisions possibly having to be made. Hey, Mac Jones you're going to subscribe to the Hippocratic Oath this week. First, do no harm. Got to appreciate my guy, Taylor Kyles, for coming in here. Just a great vat of information you spilled on all of us. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
All right. Rich Eisen coming up next. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the great Rich Eisen. You know him, you love him, you've seen him all over the place. Most recently, probably on the Rich Eisen Show. And Rich and I are good friends, and sometimes we'll exchange texts, and we did so during Sunday's game. And Rich, you basically said, "What the hell's going on out there?"
I did. I just wanted to know how things would sit in Patriot Nation, and I'm married into a Patriot family, and a lot of folks are wondering what in the world is happening. I had Chris Long, former Patriot, on my show today, and he said what I think everybody is feeling is that the Patriots have never been further away than now in the post-Brady era. And that's the way I get the sense of it, that hoping against hope in the first 4 games of the season, that Bill O'Brien's presence and whatever changes they made to the roster in the offseason would result in something better than a 1-3 record, coming off getting curb stomped by the Cowboys, with the one of the 1-3 being courtesy of the blown up Achilles of Aaron Rodgers, and the fact that Zach Wilson appeared to perhaps play his last 4 straight quarters of unreadiness for the Jets based on what we saw against the Chiefs on Sunday night. So that just lends to a general sense of unease. And I think that everybody's got a pair of eyes and senses that right now.
And everybody has that pair of eyes and working logic. And you and I have talked frequently in the past on your show about the situation here in New England, and that it has been going into our 4th season now, and they're 4 games in. You spent a ton of time with Bill Belichick when you did the NFL's top 100 players. And I know that you got a high amount of respect for him, as anybody who watches a game does.
Big time.
Do you hurt for the situation that's kind of developing here?
I do. I certainly do. Because, Matthew Judon going down in the manner in which he went down doesn't help the situation. But, but I do have a sense of, he's in charge of the roster, and I'm sure he knows the buck stops with him. And the general sense, again, is that Mac Jones has regressed. And obviously that goes on the head coach's plate, and he's somebody who would know that more than anyone else. But he also knows more football in the tip of his pinky than most people do in their entire bodies. And if there's anybody who can fix it, for the lack of a better phrase, and who can come back this coming week and the week after and put a product out on the field that suddenly looks vastly improved, it would be him. And again, I just think the Dallas Cowboys are a team that will feast on any offensive unit that has a shaky quarterback, and also the inability to put up points in significant order and fast in bunches, I guess is the only phrase for it. And this is just not a team that can play in bunches offensively. So obviously, you're the one who's more boots on the ground there about how Belichick's sense of the situation is and how people feel about it. But I'm still in the camp of, in Bill we trust.
Yep.
I just don't know what's going on with the quarterback right now.
And that's what's interesting. Aside from Mac, and you're giving me, I'm going to have a seizure. There we go. That's better.
Sorry, buddy.
Aside from Mac's ineptitude on Sunday, I sent you that tweet that I had in which it detailed that in 9 of the past 10 games, they'd fallen behind significantly. The only team they never trailed was the Jets. The only games that they won that they trailed to were against Skylar Thompson and Teddy Bridgewater and Colt McCoy. They get behind good teams and they stay behind good teams. They do it in a self-inflicted fashion. When I talked to you in July and you said, could Bill Belichick be on the hot seat? And I said, yeah, kind of. He already is. You were a little bit gobsmacked. Do you have your mind around that concept a little bit more differently now and see that it's kind of a serious Not possible. You still don't think it's a possibility, or I don't think it's a probability. I think it's on the table to start saying, I don't think we can keep going like this, Bill.
Well, obviously, if this is a 5-win season, obviously you take a look at the Dolphins and the Bills. They have to play those teams 3 more times. The Jets come back in week 18 in New England. And one would think they'd be vastly improved based on just, again, 4 quarters, but maybe not. That's divisionally. Then you see the rest of this schedule. At least the good news for them is they've gotten the toughest part of the NFC East out of the way early on. That may be another issue of why they're 1-3, and that we can find out that the opponents that they faced so far, you just want no piece of. The Dolphins, as they were perfect to start the season, and then the Cowboys and the Eagles. That's why, again, I mean, things can change so fast. That's why I'm not one of those, I guess, knee-jerk type guys. I do have a set of eyes that causes me concern. The same thing I would say about Joe Burrow and the Bengals right now at 1-3. So that said, just a perfect example, again, that it appears that maybe Zach Wilson and Mac Jones start in one of those 80 body swap movies at the end of the game, and they swap bodies because Zach Wilson, suddenly a light went on. Don't know if that can happen for Mac Jones at all. Khalil Mack entered week 4 with 0 sacks. He's now tied for the league lead with 6 of them. So truly things can change fast in the NFL. And 2 weeks from now, they could be leaving Vegas, saying goodbye. The mentor is beating the mentoree, and they're 3-3. Yep. And suddenly we're talking about something else. It does feel improbable based on the, Jerry Jones boat racing that happened. But it all does also, you and I could sit here and chat about it. It really is about what, AKK is thinking about right now.
And here's the thing. I took the Patriots to win 31-23 because I said they were a victim of circumstance in the first couple of games. They're not going to keep playing dumb. They're not going to keep killing themselves and shooting themselves in the foot and getting these massive deficits, because Bill Belichick teams are smart. They're situationally intelligent. Despite all the recent history I've seen, they're going to fix it. And not only did they fix it, Mac was a puddle in a way I've never seen him be a puddle before, with just a little helmet propped up on it. He was benched for performance, but also for peace of mind. Yeah. I think that he was going to have mental damage done by staying out there. So I don't care if they're 1-3 after 4 games, if I'm a Patriots fan, because I did not expect that. I do care if it's 38-3 and the quarterback looks like a puddle.
I hear you. But again, like I said, in the long run, do we find out that he's an equal opportunity Jones abuser, Daniel and Mac and Zach? Remarkably, Josh Dobbs performed pretty well against Micah Parsons. But then again, Dallas was also 48 hours removed from watching Trevon Diggs go down and being stunned about it. So again, like I said, let's just take a beat. It was a beat down. It was particularly difficult to see. I'm genuinely concerned about the Patriots in the same way I am about the 1-3 Bengals, because it doesn't look good. It hasn't looked good to the point where you're wondering where the pathway out resides. Certainly since you've lost a game to 3-1 Miami, you still have 2 more games to go against 3-1 Buffalo. You also have the rest of the teams that are currently on your schedule. So there is reasons to be concerned, certainly with New Orleans coming to town and that defense that can do to Mac in very, very simple ways what they've done to, Mac's predecessor before he retired on multiple occasions. It's still a lot of the same guys, same head coach now as the coordinator from that time. There is reason to be concerned. You and I talk next week. It could be panic button time, or, Derek Carr comes in and Belichick proves why McDaniels let him go. And then they face McDaniels and the Raiders that appear to be beatable. And then suddenly, you're 3-3 going to a bye.
Rich, I tallied them up. There's 9 wins on the table still. There's 9 not out of my mind wins on the table. There's Commanders, there's Raiders, there's Chargers, there's Giants, there's Steelers. I could keep going, but you guys get the point. There's another with the Jets. the team could still finish 10-7. It just doesn't feel like that on this particular Monday.
Exactly. And I agree with you, because take a look at the teams, some of the teams that you mentioned. The Commanders are not just a W on the schedule, pal.
Right.
They are not. They are not. And they can, they can go ahead, because you are. And so they can put up points. The Chargers can put up points. The team that Mac Jones brought into SoFi a couple of years ago when I was there with my family on a Halloween, and they punked the Chargers in Mac's rookie season. That team, to use a phrase from your town, is not walking through that door right now. And so that's the cause for concern. Can they pull it together and win those games? Absolutely. Are we having recency bias based on that curb stomping in the Metroplex? Absolutely. But again, there are a lot of people that can cause the same havoc that Micah Parsons did. Khalil Mack, as I mentioned, 6 sacks alone. Max Crosby is another one. He's going to be facing a ton. Cam Jordan coming up this week. There are a lot of disruptors that if Mac Jones doesn't pull it together and start playing in a way like we've seen from his rookie season, it could be a long season.
All right. This was a nice, long, enjoyable conversation that maybe brought a few Patriots fans back to earth off the Tobin. And we appreciate you taking the time. And I know you have a busy week lined up. So I appreciate
going to London, calling Jaguars Bills for NFL Network on Sunday. And then I stay there, call the Ravens and the Titans the week later. So I'll be in the booth for the next 2 Sundays.
All right. Well, give it all a proper Rogering, will you? Can't say
I will do. Cheerio, bud.
Cheerio.